lovely introduction. It's really, really great to be here. Thank you, everybody. So what I wanted to do this afternoon is I was asked to give a talk on really whatever I wanted in the field of biology, because that's what I do. I take topics that I find interesting. I mean, my PhD was in cancer research, it was in genetics, that was quite a long time ago now. What I do as a science communicator and a broadcaster is that I take topics that I find interesting or I think are going to be exciting for people like you guys, and I find out as much as I can about them, I research them, and I try and package them together in a way that I think other people will get the enjoyment and the excitement that I do from understanding things. So I decided that for today's lecture, I wanted to start by looking at an area that I find particularly interesting, which is an area that scientists call regenerative medicine. Now, I called this part of the talk Make Me Whole Again, because what I find really exciting about the concept of regenerative medicine is the idea that in the future, and it's starting to happen now as I'll start to talk about, but in the future, we may be able to use this field of medicine to be able to grow parts of the human body that have been damaged. So will we be able to regrow a human is the question that I want to ask. And the answer, as we'll see, is not yet, but let's see where we've got to so far. Now, regenerative medicine is all about growing body parts. And the idea of being able to grow body parts came originally from studying this guy. So this is an aquatic salamander. And if anyone's seen this before, has anyone seen anything about this little coloured guy? So she is really well known in the field of regenerative medicine because the insight came from this, the fact that if you chop off this salamander's tail, it will grow back. Now imagine that. If you chop off someone's leg, that's not going to grow back. It doesn't happen with us. But if we can understand how it can work in simple organisms like this guy here, then perhaps there's hope for finding out similar techniques that would work in humans. Now, as I said, we can't do this, but the salamander can. But could we, first of all, before we talk about growing a whole human, the question is, could we grow an organ? Could we grow a part of a human? Now, the first time that this came into the public eye, the public focus as something that could potentially be something exciting, was in 1997, when this little mouse was printed on the front cover of loads of scientific journals and newspapers, because it was quite controversial at the time. Has anyone seen this picture before? Yeah, a couple of people. So this was dubbed the ear mouse. It was actually called the Vacanti mouse after the Vacanti scientist who kind of created him. And this mouse basically is what looks like a normal mouse, but with what looks like a human ear on its back. Now, the controversy was, oh my God, you've genetically engineered a mouse to create a human ear. Well, actually, that didn't happen at all. What happened was that these scientists, they took a mouse and they made a kind of scaffold out of biodegradable polymer material. And they moulded it into the shape of a small ear, a 3-year-old human ear. It wasn't really a human ear, but it was moulded into the shape of a human ear. And then they took some cartilage cells, believe it or not, from a cow, from the knee of a cow, and they seeded it, which means they put it into the shape of this cartilage, onto the structure of this polymer in the shape of an ear. And then they implanted this artificial ear with some cow cells kind of growing into it. They grew it in a petri dish for a while so the cow cells could kind of infiltrate the polymer. And then they planted the ear, so they sort of sewed the ear underneath the skin but on top of the muscle of the back of the mouse. So the mouse hasn't really been changed. The mouse doesn't have any human DNA in it, or any cow DNA, except for on that ear bit itself. And amazingly, they managed to get this ear to establish itself, to grow, and then the muscles and the blood vessels of the mouse were able to infiltrate into it, and the ear was sort of able to thrive on the back of the mouse. So this was a crazy concept, and it sparked a huge area of science which was looking into growing organs. Now, admittedly, this is a potentially human or cow organ on the back of a mouse, but it sparked the interest in could we grow other organs? Could we use this technology for other things? And in fact, around the same sort of time, some scientists in America used a similar technique on a young boy, a 12-year-old boy, who had something called Poland syndrome. Now, Poland syndrome is pretty rare, and this boy what it meant was that the front part of his chest, the left side of his chest, so the bones and the cartilage overlying his heart, were missing. He actually went about his life perfectly normally, but you could see his heart beating through his chest because it was really just covered with a layer of skin, so it's incredibly dangerous. And he's reported to have said that the main problem was it stopped him from playing baseball, because obviously if a ball had hit in there, it would have gone straight into his heart. Now, the scientists used this technique that they used on the mouse to create a small section of cartilage, which they then, so they made it out of, again, a biodegradable polymer, so an artificial polymer about size and shape of a CD. They seeded it, this time with human cartilage cells, and then they implanted that disc of cartilage onto the boy's chest using his own cartilage cells, and then those grew into his own chest, and the whole thing became part of his body. So he ended up with an artificial covering to his heart that was actually then fully part of him. So this idea of being able to repair the human body using the human body's own cells was very, very, very exciting. Now, so let's backtrack a minute. Why would we need to do this? Why would we need to be able to grow organs? Well, for anyone who's ever knows anyone who's got a problem with one of their organs, heart failure, liver failure, kidney failure, there's a huge, huge, huge waiting list for donors. Now, one problem, massive waiting list, there's thousands and thousands of people waiting for a correct match to help them as they go through heart disease or liver failure. The second problem is that if you do get a donor, if you're one of the lucky ones who manages to get a donor, then you have to go through potentially a lifetime afterwards of taking drugs to suppress your immune system so that that artificial organ isn't rejected. So this is a real problem. Across the world, 22 million people are suffering from heart failure or heart disease of some kind. And there are just simply not enough donor organs to help these people. So if we could grow an organ from scratch, ideally using that person's own cells so that they're not rejected, then this would open up huge, huge possibilities in terms of disease cure worldwide. So we need to be able to replace organs. We need to be able to replace things like hearts, kidneys, livers, a pancreas, for those with diabetes, where the cells in the pancreas are not secreting insulin. If we could grow these organs, we could really, really help a lot of people. Plus, it would be, as I say, it would be their own cells, so they wouldn't be rejected. The other thing that we could do with regenerative medicine is repair damaged organs. So we're talking about people now who might have damage to some of their muscle or damage to some of their heart. So they don't have to have a replacement heart. But if we could actually help that person's own heart repair itself using these techniques, then that would be fantastic. So for example, people who've had a stroke, part of their brain needs repairing. If we could encourage their brain to repair itself, we could help people recover from stroke. Heart disease, we spoke about, cardiovascular disease, growth and repair of the heart itself, and also, big one, nerve damage which leads to paralysis. Now there's countless people across the world who are suffering from nerve damage which causes paralysis, and at present, I'll come back to this a bit later, but there's very little possibility of being able to regrow nerve cells and repair that kind of damage. If we could use these regeneration techniques to regrow nerves, then we're opening up a hugely exciting area, which would be the cure of paralysis. Finally, if we could actually regrow organs, it would help people who've actually lost parts of their body due to amputation by accidents, or through congenital defects, through birth defects, or through war veterans. So we're talking about making a new organ for someone who's got a failed organ, we're talking about repairing an organ for someone whose organ is damaged, or we're talking about growing it sort of from scratch where it's missing. Now, in order to understand the potential of this new technique, these loads of new techniques that have been investigated for the last 10, 20 years now, we need to understand about stem cells. Now, it all comes down to stem cells. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know about stem cells. Have you heard of stem cells? Anybody? A few nods? Great. So what is a stem cell? Now, a stem cell, quite simple, it's a single cell which can do two things. It can replicate itself. Now, all cells can replicate themselves. Well, most cells can replicate themselves. Brain cells, not so often. So it can make copies of itself. Okay, what's new? But here's the exciting thing about stem cells, is that they can turn into pretty much, depending what type of stem cell it is, pretty much any other type of cell in the body. So the simplest form of a stem cell is the very first cell of a new baby. The egg and the sperm come together, create one cell, which is going to become the embryo. That is a stem cell. Because that cell can then make heart cells, tongue cells, skin cells, brain cells, toe cells from that original cell. So a stem cell is a cell that retains the ability to turn into other types of cells. Now, our skin cells are what's called differentiated. They've become skin cells, they're going to stay as skin cells. But in our body, we have some cells that can replace